Welcome to the Debka File, a weekly roundup of exclusive news, insight, and analysis from the Middle East, broadcast to you live from the heart of the region. Coming up on the program today, Russia and Iran are preparing a response to the U.S.-led strike on Syria. Syrian strike isolates Israel against Iran and Russia. Israel's concern on the Lebanese and Gaza fronts. Syrian, Iranian, and Hezbollah forces scatter out of harm's way. Inside the failed Russian-Iranian-Turkish summit. And now to our top headlines. Moscow has boosted its ties with Tehran and increased the Syrian military in response to Saturday's missile strike on Syria's chemical sites. Debka File reports that on Saturday, a Syrian Hezbollah force backed by Russia renewed its operation to cross the Euphrates River and take over the East Syrian gas and oil fields from the U.S. On Thursday, an advisor to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei told a news source that he hopes to liberate the area east of the Euphrates line and expel the Americans. Russian bombers have been deployed to air bases in the Hamadan province, cutting their flying time to Syria and Iraq by 4 hours. The U.S. has limited its operation to 3 sites where Bashar al-Assad has been making and stockpiling chemical weapons. Yet Assad still retains large quantities of the weapons, even after the sites were struck by missiles. U.S. President Trump and Defense Secretary James Mattis have been disputing about the U.S.-led operation in Syria. Here's what President Trump had to say.
My fellow Americans, a short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. A combined operation with the armed forces of France and the United Kingdom is now underway. We thank them both. Last Saturday, the Assad regime again deployed chemical weapons to slaughter innocent civilians, this time in the town of Douma, near the Syrian capital of Damascus. This massacre was a significant escalation in a pattern of chemical weapons use by that very terrible regime. The evil and the despicable attack left mothers and fathers, infants and children thrashing in pain and gasping for air. These are not the actions of a man, they are crimes of a monster instead. We are prepared to sustain this response until the Syrian regime stops its use of prohibited chemical agents.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, discussed the U.S. strategy of the attack.
We will continue to seek out and call out anyone who uses and anyone who aids in the use of chemical weapons. With yesterday's military action, our message was crystal clear. The United States of America will not allow the Assad regime to continue to use chemical weapons.
James Mattis tried to curtail the operation on Saturday by calling it a one-time shot.
Clearly, the Assad regime did not get the message last year. This time, our allies and we have struck harder. Together, we have sent a clear message to Assad and his murderous lieutenants that they should not perpetrate another chemical weapons attack for which they will be held accountable. But right now, this is a one-time shot, and I believe that it sent a very strong message to dissuade him, to deter him from doing this again.
Trump relies on his support from his new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, as well as his new National Security Advisor, John Bolton, for expanding the U.S. military action in Syria. He aims to dissolve the Russian-Iranian bond in Syria, which was recently joined by Turkey. His challenge to Europe to fix the flaws in the 2015 Iran nuclear deal has turned into a larger plan for the U.S. and Europe by putting military pressure on Iran in Syria. The Pentagon says that the U.S. strikes in Syria hit every target.
This operation does not represent a change in U.S. policy, nor an attempt to depose the Syrian regime. These strikes were a justified, legitimate, and proportionate response to the Syrian regime's continued use of chemical weapons on its own people. We do not seek conflict in Syria, but we cannot allow such grievous violations of international law. Our goal in Syria remains defeating ISIS by, with, and through the 70-nation coalition. But we will not stand by passively while Assad, backed by Russia and Iran, ignores international law.
Meanwhile, France and the UK are joining forces with the U.S., along with Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. Trump believes that this venture does not interfere with his goal to remove U.S. troops from Syria, and that this could possibly help in the long run. The Trump agenda was put into action last Monday when Israeli Air Force jets fired missiles at the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's aerospace headquarters in Syria. 7 Iranian servicemen were killed. This strike gave notice to Russia that the U.S. would not limit its operations to Syrian targets. Debka sources report that the U.S.-led strike in Syria put Israel on guard to face a possible retaliation from Iran. Israeli forces are on high alert on its northern borders with Syria and Lebanon. Syrian ruler Bashar al-Assad, Iran leader General Qasem Soleimani, and Hezbollah's Hassan Nasrallah were relieved that the Trump administration guaranteed that additional military action would only occur if Assad repeated his use of chemical weapons. Nasrallah claimed on Sunday, quote, Western strikes on Syria had failed to terrorize the army, help insurgents, or even serve Israel's interests. His assessment was confirmed by UN Ambassador Nikki Haley on Fox News on Sunday. She was asked when U.S. troops would be pulled out of Syria, as President Trump had promised, and mentioned that the administration's 3 goals were: the first is an end to the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian war, the second is the complete destruction of the Islamic State, and the third goal is that Trump, quote, wanted to make sure that we had good grounds to watch what Iran was doing, and they weren't making a lot of aggressive headway in terms of that, because Iran is a national threat to American interests. Haley did not mention anything about the threat posed by Iran's military presence in Syria, even though that could have a direct impact on Israel's security. Therefore, when President Trump said he would leave Syria up to the others, he included Israel and Jordan, who will be left to face the threats on their own. Jordan's King Abdullah will seek security guarantees from Assad rather than facing a fight to defend his border. However, Israel is now left with less U.S. support in Syria. Trump's decision to put new sanctions on Russian entities for supplying Syria with materials to manufacture chemical weapons moved the conflict into an economic realm. Iranian, Syrian, and Hezbollah officers have been sharing bases, coordinating their operations. Tehran has now given Moscow permission to put Russia bombers in Syria at Artesh's Shahid Nojeh Air Base in Hamadan. This collaboration between Moscow and Tehran is a direct threat to Israel's security. With us to discuss these issues is Shlomo Blom, Brigadier General and Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
How does the U.S., British, and French missile strike directly affect Israel?
I don't think that it has a serious effect on Israel because it was aimed only on sending a message to the Bashar Assad regime that he should not use chemical weapons. But that is not a real concern of Israel. We don't think that the Syrian regime is going to use chemical weapons or to dare to use chemical weapons against Israel. Our main problem is the presence of Iran and its proxies in Syria and the support that they are getting from Russia.
Do you feel that Trump's upcoming plan to remove U.S. forces from Syria could hurt Israel and the entire region in the long run?
I don't think that it can directly hurt Israel because the ground troops that will be pulled out of Syria are, in the northern eastern corner of Syria. It has nothing to do with the areas that are of concern to Israel. I think it may be harmful on the long run because it can allow the Islamic State, Daesh, to resurface.
Do you think the U.S. attack will prevent the Assad regime from continuing to use chemical weapons?
I think there is a good probability that he will change his calculus. You know, the benefits that he is getting from use of chemical weapons vis-a-vis the cost of these chemical weapons to him, and he will decide not to use them. I am not sure that he needs them so much. You know, he is quite in a good military position vis-a-vis the rebels, mostly because of the support of Russia and the Iranian proxies.
How do you think it will affect the strategic balance in Syria?
Once again, it's not going to affect the strategic balance between Israel and this alliance of Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and the other Iranian proxies that is supported by Russia. It has nothing to do with that.
That's Shlomo Brom. Thank you very much for your insight today.
You are welcome.
Last Tuesday, Ali Akbar Velayati, the senior advisor to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, stated that Iran wants U.S. forces driven out of Syria.
و شرق فرات منطقه بسیار مهم و ارزشمندی است. امیدواریم که گام‌های بعدی در جهت آزادی شرق فرات و اخراج امریکایی‌های اشغالگر از اون منطقه بشود. ادلب یک شهر مهم سوریه است که انشاءالله امیدواریم به زودی با همت دولت سوریه و متحدینش آزاد بشود.
Israel Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said that, quote, "We shall not let Iran establish itself in Syria, whatever the cost. We have no other choice. Accepting a permanent Iranian presence in Syria means accepting an Iranian noose around our necks. We can't let this happen." Debka military sources state that Israel still hopes Moscow will contain Iran's military grip on Syria. However, Israel's faith in Moscow has been declining due to Moscow's increasing ties with Iran in Syria. Iran has been allowed to increase shipments for Hezbollah to Syria and Lebanon, and some have unloaded at air bases shared with the Russian Air Force. Iran is setting up several new military bases in Syria, some connected to Russian facilities. Russian mercenaries have been attached to Iranian and Hezbollah forces conducting military operations. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah said Israel's strike in Syria put it into conflict with Iran.
أريد أن أقول للإسرائيليين عليهم أن يعرفوا أنا كاتبهم من نقيهم بدقة وحقراهم عليهم أن يعرفوا أنهم ارتكبوا خطأ تاريخيا مو خطأ عادي وأقدموا على حماقة كبرى وأنهم أدخلوا أنفسهم في قتال مباشر مع إيران مع الجمهورية الإسلامية في إيران.
Israeli military leaders are concerned that Russian military advisors are helping to establish new Syrian army units and are training the pro-Iranian Iraqi Shiite militias in Syria. Israel is also concerned President Putin agreed to Turkish President Erdogan's commanding his army to invade Afrin. Russian-Israeli relations also declined after the Israeli airstrikes in Syria in February, which were in reaction to an Iranian drone intrusion. After that incident, Putin withdrew the help to Israeli air operations in Syrian airspace. Russia also discovered that Israeli raiders who had wiped out the entire radar network around Damascus, which exposed the Syrian capital and its surrounding territory to aerial and missile assault. Last Wednesday, Netanyahu and Putin spoke over the phone about the situation in Syria. Putin demanded that Israel needs to stop its operations in Syria and start respecting its sovereignty and security. Netanyahu replied that Israel is determined to prevent Iran's military expansion into Syria. Moscow and Tehran plan to counter the upcoming U.S., British, French operation. The Israeli security forces have decided that in the event of Iranian aggression, the IDF will deliver a blow to Iranian positions in Syria or Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his family are in hiding in Syria. The military command centers in Damascus have emptied, including the Syrian General Command. The only remaining forces in the capital are the air defense units, which have been aided by Russian anti-air missiles. The Syrian army's 4th Armored Division was evacuated with its commander, Bashar's brother, from its bases around Damascus. Assad tried to conceal his special tank unit, which is equipped with Russian T-90 tanks, and he spearheaded the battles in eastern Ghouta. The main Syrian air bases are now deserted. Aircraft and flight personnel have been evacuated from the military air base near Damascus. These include the military air base outside Damascus, the military airport, and Al Dumair, where helicopters carrying poison gas bombed Douma on April 7th. Since Israel's missile attack on April 9th on the T4 air base, which was shared by Syrian, Russian, and Iranian air forces, it stands empty. Assad has moved planes out of their western and central bases to the northernmost part of the country near the Iraqi border, hoping they will be out of reach from the U.S. cruise missiles. Iran and Hezbollah have left a strong force in the Deir ez-Zor region of the southeastern Syria area, which is armed with missiles and artillery and under command to go for the U.S. bases in the Kurdish regions as soon as U.S., French, and British forces begin their offensive. On Saturday, they made another attempt to cross the Euphrates. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Western strikes on Syria were lawless.
В этой связи хочу напомнить, что точно такие же слова мы слышали год назад, даже чуть больше, когда те же белые каски сообщили о том, что в Хан-Шейхуне, в провинции Идлиб, был применен зарин, и что это абсолютно не подлежит никакому сомнению. Западные партнеры незамедлительно ухватились за это и стали выдавать полученные очень сомнительные видео, как и в случае с Думой, за неопровержимые факты. В отношении Думы то же самое. Есть неопровержимые факты. Об этом нам говорят сейчас, оправдывая те удары, которые были нанесены. Кроме упоминаний СМИ и соцсетей и вот этого видео, достаточно смешного для специалистов, ничего более не приводится.
The Russian defense minister had this to say about the operation.
Минобороны России обладает многочисленными доказательствами, что 7 апреля в Думе была осуществлена именно спланированная провокация с целью введения в заблуждение мирового сообщества. Ее подлинная цель сегодня всем понятна – спровоцировать США к нанесению ракетных ударов по Сирии. Сегодня в распоряжении российского военного ведомства имеются и другие доказательства, которые свидетельствуют о непосредственном участии Великобритании в организации этой провокации в Восточной Гуте. Нам достоверно известно, что с 3 по 6 апреля на представителей так называемых «белых касок» оказывалось мощное давление именно из Лондона для скорейшего осуществления готовившейся заранее провокации.
The summit in Istanbul between Russian, Iranian, and Turkish presidents was not well timed. Putin, Rouhani, and Erdogan did not know that less than a week later, the U.S., Russia, Iran, Syria, the UK, and Israel would be discussing Assad's use of chemical weapons in Damascus. After the Israeli attack on the T4 airbase in Syria, Trump declared a U.S.-led operation to punish Assad. The Istanbul summit and its content then became obsolete. Iran, Russia, and Turkey tried to agree on whether the Turkish army in northern Syria should capture Manbij, whether Russia and Iran should follow along with this Turkish tactic, and how to deal with Idlib on the Turkish border. They also wondered whether they could come up with a collective strategy for opposing the American military presence in Syria. The goal of the summit for Putin was to pull Turkey away from its ties with the U.S. and commitment to NATO following the investment of Russian assets, but he was unsuccessful. With the U.S. planning a military operation against Russia and Iran in Syria, Turkey did not want to join forces with Moscow and Tehran.
Dün akşam Sayın Trump'la görüştüm. Bugün Sayın Putin'le görüşmem var. Kendileriyle görüşeceğim. Ve birlikte bu kimyasal katliamı nasıl durdururuz? Bunu kendileriyle tekrar konuşacağım. Suriye topraklarında yürüttüğümüz operasyonların amacı da rejimin baskısına ve katliamlarına maruz kalmış milyonlarca insana kendi evlerinde güvenli bir gelecek sağlamaktır. Suriye toprakları herkes için güvenli hale gelene kadar oradaki varlığımızı ve faaliyetlerimizi sürdüreceğiz. Ne Amerika ile olan müttefikliğimizden ne de Rusya ile enerjiden güvenliğe kadar geniş bir alanda kurduğumuz stratejik ilişkilerimizden ne de İran'la bölge sorunlarının çözümünde birlikte çalışmaktan vazgeçmek gibi bir niyetimiz yoktur. Bizim Rusya, İran ve Çin gibi ülkelerle kurduğumuz ilişkiler Batı ile olan ilişkilerimizin alternatifi değil. Tam tersine tamamlayıcısıdır.
And now for a roundup of this week's regional stories, the news in brief. The Saudi Arabian city of Riyadh is hosting its first ever Fashion Week. Under the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, social restrictions have been lifted, allowing women to drive cars and attend sports arenas. Women typically wear abayas, loose-fitting robes symbolic of holiness. With the new reforms, women have been wearing more stylish clothes, often trimmed with velvet or lace. Over 1,500 people are expected to attend the event, including 400 from abroad.
I'm very proud to participate in this first edition Arab Fashion Week in Saudi Arabia because it's a part of the revolution of the women in this country.
It's basically opening the doors for the fashion industry, for the brands, for the new entrepreneurs.
A Jordanian farmer is growing healing plants in her garden in the Jordan Valley. She grows all types of herbs that are used to heal an array of health conditions and ailments. One of her most popular plants is sage, which she claims is used to strengthen the immune system. She says selling the plants has become profitable and has allowed her children to go to the university. Her dream is to continue her garden and eventually turn it into a tourist destination. That's it for this week's edition of the Debka File. We'll be back with you next week for exclusive news, insight, and analysis from the Middle East. Thanks for watching.